The level is progressing well and gives a clear, realistic indication of what it aims to be. The most important aim for the team is to have the shelves fully stocked. Using methods like material IDs is imperative to achieving completion by the deadline, as this will ensure the efficiency of asset creation and allowing more time to be spent on helping other members of the team to maintain the quality and consistency that the level demands. Assisting team members by sharing knowledge has been emphasised and demonstrated through the project so far. Two examples of this being the rundowns of high poly methods and introductions to material elements. Time management for the team has been set at a minimum of 10 hours per week for each team member. Each week, everyone is assigned specific tasks, often linked with personal strengths, which in total should equate to the desired 10 hours spent. Regular feedback on produced content through the group's Facebook page ensures that the assets are detailed enough to accommodate into the constantly evolving level. On the subject of individual strengths, each week I assign myself the task of handling the more natural sections of the supermarket. As I had been using ZBrush for some time now, the assets being displayed currently utilise the workflow of ZBrush to Maya for UVing and baking, then to Substance Painter for texturing. Substance Painter allowed for these assets in particular a higher level of control whilst having the ability to constantly adjust parameters to create colour variations. I was also successful in having the car drive around the track. This proved to be a balancing act in both the car scale and the spring arm, as we wanted an optimal driving experience in engine and the ability to showcase the created assets by the group members. Whilst currently we are pleased with the camera state and vehicle size, the issue of car acceleration stuttering has arisen and is linked to the car being scaled down. The current issues of the project have been through communication and contribution. However, through acknowledging both before they became too impeding, meant that they were tackled quickly and we were able to persevere, allowing us to focus our energy on the level rather than lingering on team issues. At the current rate of production, our team should have the supermarket interior completed by week 10, allowing 2 weeks of overflow in case problems occur. This leaves the final 2 weeks for the loading bay, if we choose to factor this in.
I started off working on the floor props to get some basic features into our level. These included pallets, cardboard boxes, aisle shelving, smaller props for the shelving, the salad bar, and I also modelled a basis for the tills. I passed this on to Elliot to texture as we decided Substance Painter would be much more beneficial for the tills. I also started testing the material elements with the cardboard box prop, just to see how I can create multiple variations of one prop by using material IDs. Whilst modelling, I constantly posted screenshots into the Facebook group to get feedback on the props to ensure all the group members were happy with the progress. Also, when the props were finished, I placed them into OneDrive so all members could access them and place them in the scene if needed. I'm currently focusing on the support beams for the supermarket, and I'm also working on smaller props to place on the shelving, just to fill up the scene a little more. In addition to these props, I plan to use the material ID method to help with filling up the shelves so I can make different colour variations quickly, just to make it seem like there are different props. This is also the task assigned for the next week, as all shelves need to be fully stocked up. To ensure there aren't any duplicate props or people working on the same prop, we regularly update Trello to give clear indication to our teammates what we are working on, what has been created and what needs to be done. If we have any issues, we communicate via Facebook.
For my part, in this current stage of the project, I have been making an asset for the shopping trolley. Using Maya, I have first started out by making a high poly version of the shopping trolley. Then I made a low poly version as well, whilst applying smooth face normals for the load subdivision cylinders. This is for the high poly version to be baked down to the low poly version, which is good for optimization as it greatly reduces the amount of tries there are, whilst still retaining the high quality detail of the asset. Feedback has been received which has made me aware of that the amount of tries in the shopping trolley were a bit too many, as originally the amount of tries there was 3,590. This has been reduced down to 3,102 tries, mainly by reducing the amount of sides that the cylinders have. We have decided that using traditional methods of texturing would not have been suitable for the shopping trolley, as it is mostly made out of metal. The PBR texturing in Unreal Engine 4 is more suitable for it. A constant 3 vector has been used to texture the metal, as well as constants for metallic and roughness values. Material elements were used to separate the materials. The next asset I have made is the no entry sign of which has used a similar pipeline of work as the shopping trolley. I received help from Jason on constructing the high poly details and on breaking them down to a low poly version, which resulted in having just 257 tries with a high detailed asset. This also uses PBR texturing for the metal as well. This asset took around 10 hours to complete. My task now is to create smaller props for the dry food section, as most of the obstacles and shelves are already placed. After that, I will work on creating alcohol shelf assets and finishing off the texturing of the shopping trolley. Each week I plan to get as many assets done in a recommended 10-hour time period.
I have finished the soda can movement with help from a few online tutorials and a tiny bit of common sense, and here is a screenshot of the blueprint and a video of the test. I have been working on lots of floor props and I'm trying to churn out 3 assets a week, including the UVs, which I try to fit into the 10 hours of work a week. The feedback I got from the group is mostly positive and has been simple changes. The alcohol shells were changed, as the original design had a block barrier, but it was considered to be boring and I was asked to change it in favour of bars, which looked much better. I was also asked to create a shortened version, which I created by adding an edge loop in the middle of the frame, deleting one half and adding a new connecting face. Another improvement suggested for most models was to simply use the bevel tool on edges to make the geometry smoother looking. To get constant feedback, we all posted regularly on our Facebook page and offered and received advice fairly quickly to keep the speedy workflow going. To develop high poly skills, Jason taught me how to high poly the footstool. The normal map, however, went a little wrong, and I managed to trace the problem to smoothed edges and the topology, which I rebuilt and then rebaked, which seemed to work. My latest job is to create a skybox and shop entrance. I was given the skybox task because of my previous use of one in my RTE. This gives me the opportunity to use some assets I made for the loading bay area, which we decided to add to the wish list.
The vehicle had separate completion times to the props, leading through week 2 until now, allowing enough time to work out problems within engine and time to learn new texturing techniques that could help in the long run. As I was working on the vehicle, I started with the concepting for the first few weeks, spending a week refining the vehicle block out and could then move on to the high and low poly modelling. I was given this task due to my prior work with vehicles last term, and with the far more flexible deadlines, I was able to pass any modelling and knowledge regarding the methodology to other group members, ensuring that everybody understood the premise of high poly modelling and the mindset required to construct low poly models suited best for quick and easy high poly creation. The basis behind this was to construct each piece of geometry with quads, visualising each edge loop to ensure they would flow neatly across each face, whilst avoiding any triangles. As I high poly geometry using Smooth Preview to ensure the best result, this is crucial. Smooth Preview creates a curve from every first to third vertex, using the second vertex as a reference point for the curve. Due to this, the closer two vertices are positioned, the sharper the edge. If a model is constructed with quads, it makes it very easy to loop these edge loops around the top, bottom and edges of each corner, giving not too sharp a curve but just enough to soften it. With a bit of practice, you can visualise exactly how the model will look with smoothing just by subconsciously measuring the distance between each set of 3 vertices. Convert these models from Smooth Mesh Preview to Polygon and you'll be left with a highly detailed bake. Following these principles, constructing the vehicle was far less strenuous, as once low poly was constructed using quads, I could create a duplicate before adding edge loops and extra geometry to beef up the detail. A huge downside to this methodology is that it leaves you with a monumental task of cleaning up the unnecessary quads in the low poly, which there could be thousands of. In my opinion, this is quite a small price to pay though, with a huge decrease of time required to construct the fully detailed high poly. For the UVing, I was introduced to Unfold 3D by Elliot, allowing me to simply project whole components before cutting each edge where I wanted the required seam. It didn't work perfectly every time, and the UV still needed to be corrected before the grand game of Tetris could begin, but in comparison to the older planar method, it must have saved me at least 10 hours of work. Baking was quite simple due to the extreme similarities between both the high and low poly models, but to prevent any issues from arising within the bakes, and to minimise cleanup, I baked every individual piece of geometry separately before combining these in Photoshop. We used both Substance Designer and Painter for the texturing stages, as Elliot wanted to show the advantages of these new software packages, creating the base metals in Designer before we painted on extra dirt, rust and chip details within Substance Painter. I believe we achieved a good result for a vehicle that was intended to contrast in its environment. With all that extra time saved, I managed to create a fully detailed high and low poly bread stand before baking these out and placing them within engine. At this stage, I believe we are perfectly on track and should have all but the loading bay completed by the end of week 10, leaving the last 2 weeks for overflow. Now let's have a drive through the track.